It's still weird to be on TV with you. I love you, just like the rest of America loves you. And I have a hard political question to ask you. And I know you are not Mike Bloomberg, but you are here, for his campaign. Recently in Texas, there was a mass shooting, and it was prevented after a member of the church's voluntary security team, a man named Jack Wilson, stopped the gunman who had opened fire on the church. 2 people were killed, but thanks to his actions, more were saved. And Mike Bloomberg, I was very surprised. He said, it's the job of the law enforcement to have guns and decide when to shoot. You don't just want the average citizen carrying a gun in a crowded place. And I think this is an example of Exhibit A of why it's good to carry, because God knows what could happen. And I actually think he has a lot of crossover appeal, except on this issue.
I am not a Michael Bloomberg surrogate.
Okay.
So, which means that
but you're
we may not agree on everything. I have always felt that the bad guys will always get guns. I was involved in criminal justice for a quarter of a century before I got this great gig that I have now.
That's for sure.
And there was a time when Jerry and I both had carry licenses and carried guns. He actually carried a gun before I did. And the question for me personally, because you always bring things back to yourself, at least if
in TV.
if you mean. I always felt a little bit safer when I was walking in the street with Jerry. It was late at night, we were walking home, that he was carrying a gun. On the flip side of that, I sometimes wondered, when I went to bed with him after a fight, was I going to wake up in the morning? Was I going to say, I had enough of this one? So I think that there has to be, we have a Second Amendment in this country that entitles everybody to, who should have a gun, if they want to, and if they pass appropriate background checks, and if they secure them properly so that they can't be touched by children. You have the Second Amendment. It's never going to change. I personally don't think anybody in this country needs a gun that's capable of shooting 100 rounds in 60 seconds.
Exactly.
I don't think that they should be manufactured. I don't know how he thinks about that.
So access with limitation.
Yes.
My question is more, do you think it'll hurt him in red states?
I don't. Mike Bloomberg is an honest man.
Oh, yes, yes.
And he's always been for gun control, but he's not taking away people's Second Amendment rights. Right. I don't think. I have never heard him say that.
No. Yeah.
He wants.
Gun control with limitations, and he's been very, very open about his work in that space. But I want to ask you this, because one of the policies that Bloomberg spearheaded while he was as mayor of New York City was stop-and-frisk policing, which really did damage to Black and brown communities here in New York, and which is very troubling to me. He recently apologized for it. My question is he really sorry? Because it appeared to be a bit disingenuous, in my view. Or is this just an attempt at recruiting Black and brown voters, which he needs in order to become Democratic candidate?
Well,
he must have that.
First, let's talk about stop and frisk for a second.
Only a minute, Judy.
I have a minute?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to talk fast.
Yeah.
Terry versus Ohio was a Supreme Court of the United States decision in 1968. And it provided the police the ability to stop on suspicion, not probable cause, someone and pat them down. You remember, they're called Terry stops. That procedure was started long before Mike Bloomberg in New York City, but it was enhanced.
Abused it.
The New York Police Department, under the Bloomberg administration, continued previous administrations, and I think stepped it up.
Yeah.
And I actually believe that, and I watched him when he spoke, I think that it got to him, people got to him, and they say, when you're stopped and you don't have a gun, and you aren't doing anything wrong, that moment can stay with you forever. And I think he never looked at it from that perspective. And I think that having been faced with it now and spoken to people, I think it came from his heart when he said, I'm sorry that it happened to so many people who were innocent of any wrongdoing.